Look at this fossil. You're 29, read, not 19. You think these old bones can keep up with my 18-year-old killers? Think you can handle the forge? The word from Drill Sergeant Gunner Vance cut through the shimmering heat of the Fort Jackson rifle range, sharp and cruel. A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the formation of trainees, a mix of fear and relief that they weren't the target of his volcanic temper. They stood in rigid lines, the sun beating down on their helmets, the air thick with the scent of pine needles, sweat, and apprehension. This was the final week, the crucible of basic combat training, and Vance was the gatekeeper. He paced before them like a caged predator, his jaw a granite block of institutional cynicism, his eyes cold and dismissive, locked on a trainee, Evelyn Reed. She stood perfectly still, a statue of calm in a sea of nervous energy. She didn't flinch. She didn't scowl. Her gaze remained fixed forward, her expression a blank slate. Her hands, however, told a different story. They moved over her M4 carbine with a quiet, practiced economy, verifying the chamber was clear, checking the security of the magazine, her fingers tracing the lines of the weapon not with the fumbling uncertainty of a novice, but with the familiar reverence of a master craftsman for a well-worn tool. Vance saw only a woman older than the rest, someone who didn't fit the mold, a potential weak link in the chain he was forging. But a few feet away, observing from the shade of the command tower, Colonel Marcus Thorne saw something else entirely. He saw not slowness, but deliberation. He saw not age, but experience etched into the steady set of her shoulders. He saw the way she held her rifle, not as a piece of issued equipment, but as an extension of her own body. The colonel leaned forward slightly, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, a memory from a dusty, faraway war zone stirring in his mind. If you believe that true strength is measured in action, not volume, type competence below. Vance continued his assault, his voice a rasping megaphone of contempt. He stepped closer to Reed, invading her personal space, his shadow falling over her. "What's the matter, Reed? Cat got your tongue? Or are you just too tired from your morning fiber supplement to talk?" More laughter, this time louder, bolder. The other trainees, desperate to stay off Vance's radar, joined the chorus. Reed remained a pillar of silence. Her focus was absolute, her world narrowed to the 50-pound pack on her back, the rifle in her hands, and the task ahead. She was an island of professional composure in an ocean of manufactured chaos. Vance interpreted her silence as weakness, as fear. He saw it as confirmation of his own superior judgment. He was the expert, the one who could spot a washout from a mile away. To him, Reed was a classic case, a misguided patriot who thought she could turn back the clock, a civilian playing dress-up who was about to be broken by the unyielding reality of the United States Army. He pointed a thick, accusatory finger at her. "I've seen you type before. You'll be the first to quit when the pressure is on. You'll be the one crying for your mommy when the real work starts. You are a liability to every single soldier on this line." He spat the words out, each one a little stone of humiliation hurled at her impassive face. But his words found no purchase. They slid off her silent armor, unable to penetrate the deep well of calm that resided within. She simply blinked once, a slow, deliberate motion, and then returned to her pre-fire checklist, her hands moving with the unhurried precision of a surgeon. The injustice of the moment hung thick in the air, a palpable tension that coiled in the guts of every recruit who witnessed it. They saw a woman being publicly dismantled, and they saw her absorb it without a single crack in her facade, a mystery that was both unsettling and deeply compelling. The command finally came, a sharp, metallic bark from the tower loudspeaker. "Firers, on your marks." The chaos Vance had cultivated instantly evaporated, replaced by the frantic energy of the qualification exercise. Trainees scrambled, fumbling with magazines and dropping into the prone position with clumsy haste. The air filled with the sounds of grunts, clattering equipment, and barked orders. But from Lane 12, there was only a fluid, deliberate silence. Trainee Reed moved with an eerie, practiced grace that stood in stark contrast to the jerky motions of those around her. She didn't rush. She flowed. Her body dropped to the red South Carolina dirt, not in a heap, but in a single, controlled motion. The rifle came to her shoulder as if drawn by a magnet, the stock finding the pocket of her shoulder with an intimacy born of thousands of hours of repetition. Her breathing, audible in the sudden lull before the firing began, was a slow, rhythmic cadence, in out a measured pause at the bottom of the exhale. It was the breathing of a predator, of a hunter, of someone for whom this environment of extreme pressure was not a crucible, but a home. She didn't just look at the distant targets. She seemed to commune with them, her focus an invisible line of energy connecting her eye to the dead center of the black silhouette. Her finger curled around the trigger, resting on the cold steel with a feather-light touch. She was a study in stillness, a perfect fusion of soldier and weapon, a portrait of lethal competence waiting for the signal to be unleashed. The silence before the storm was deafening, and in that silence, all eyes were unknowingly drawn to the quiet woman in Lane 12. Begin. The world exploded in a cacophony of controlled violence. The range erupted with the sharp, staccato crack of dozens of M4s firing in ragged unison. Brass casings spun through the air like angry, golden insects. But from Lane 12, a different sound emerged. It wasn't a frantic barrage. It was a rhythm, a steady and relentless drumbeat. Pop, 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 10 shots from the prone supported position. While others struggled to reacquire their targets after each recoil, Reed seemed to absorb the rifle's kick into her very bones, the barrel barely moving, her sights returning to the target's center mass with supernatural speed. The targets at 50 meters dropped, one after another. Transition, prone, unsupported. The command blared. Reed moved again, her motions economical and swift, shifting her support hand without a wasted gesture. Another 10 shots, another 10 targets down at 100 meters. Pop, pop, pop. The rhythm was unbroken. Transition, kneeling. She rose to one knee in a single, fluid movement, a cobra rising from the dust. The rifle remained an extension of her will. The targets at 200 meters began to fall. Her fellow trainees started to notice. The frantic energy on the line began to subside as heads turned, their own shooting faltering as they watched the impossible display unfolding beside them. Even the range instructors lowered their binoculars, their faces a mixture of confusion and awe. The final set of targets, silhouettes at 300 meters, were mere specks to the naked eye. For Reed, they might as well have been 10 feet away. Pop, pop, pop. The last target fell. A profound, ringing silence descended upon the entire range. Every weapon had fallen quiet. Every eye was fixed on Lane 12's monitor. The numbers glowed in stark, green finality, 40/40ths. A perfect score. A feat so rare it had become the stuff of legend at Fort Jackson. Drill Sergeant Vance stood frozen, his jaw slack, the arrogant smirk wiped clean from his face, replaced by a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. No, he whispered to himself, the word lost in the sudden, deafening quiet. That's not possible. The silence was broken by the crunch of gravel. Colonel Thorne descended from the tower, his stride long and purposeful. He walked past the rows of stunned trainees and bewildered drill sergeants, his eyes fixed on one person. He ignored Vance, who snapped to a clumsy, flustered position of attention as the commander approached. Thorne walked directly to Lane 12 and stopped in front of the quiet trainee, who was now methodically clearing her weapon, her focus still entirely on the task at hand. Only when her rifle was safely cleared and grounded did she look up and acknowledge the base commander, her eyes meeting his with a calm, steady gaze. Trainee Reed, Thorne said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of command. Reed simply nodded. At ease, the colonel said, his tone softening slightly. He turned to his aide. Give me her service record. Now a few moments of tense silence passed as the aide spoke into his radio. Then the voice of the operator crackled back, audible to everyone nearby. Sir, I have the file for. Reed, Evelyn. Are you sure this is correct, sir? The colonel's eyes never left Reed. Read it to me, Lieutenant. Every word. The aide cleared his throat, his own voice now tinged with disbelief as he began to read from the screen of his tablet. The reveal began not with a shout, but with a quiet, official recitation that would dismantle every assumption Vance had ever made. Each word was a hammer blow against the brittle facade of prejudice. Name, Reed Evelyn. Rank, Captain, United States Army. A collective gasp rippled through the assembled soldiers. Drill Sergeant Vance's face went pale, the blood draining from it as if from a mortal wound. The aide continued, his voice gaining momentum as the weight of the information settled in. Current unit assignment, 75th Ranger Regiment, Regimental Reconnaissance Company. The name of the elite Special Operations Unit hung in the air, a testament to a level of soldiering that was almost mythical to the trainees and even to most instructors. Vance's eyes widened in horror. Status, active duty, present assignment listed as Special Assessment Program, Training and Doctrine Command. Under a voluntary, temporary reduction in rank, the aide paused, taking a breath before delivering the final, devastating volleys of truth. Notable awards and decorations include the Silver Star, the Bronze Star Medal with V for Valor, the Purple Heart, the Combat Infantryman Badge, and a Ranger Tab. The list was a litany of heroism, a biography written in blood, sacrifice, and unparalleled skill. Marksmanship qualifications, Distinguished Rifleman Badge, President's 100 Tab. Special Skills classifications, Master Breacher, Military Freefall Parachutist, Jump Master, SOTIC Level 1 Graduate. The recitation ended. The silence that followed was heavier and more profound than before. It was a silence filled with shock, with shame, and with a dawning, immense respect. Colonel Thorne slowly turned to face Captain Reed. He drew himself up to his full height, his back ramrod straight. He raised his hand to his brow in a slow, perfect, ceremonial salute. "Captain," he said, his voice resonating with an authority that left no room for doubt. "Your evaluation of my drill sergeants is complete. I take it? Forgive me, ma'am. We were not aware." The story of that day on the range became an instant legend, spreading through the barracks and training fields of Fort Jackson like wildfire. It was told in hushed, reverent tones by trainees huddled in their bunks after lights out. It was discussed with a mixture of professional embarrassment and grudging admiration by the drill sergeants in their private mess. The tale was simple in its telling, but profound in its meaning. The day Drill Sergeant Vance tried to break the old woman and instead found himself face to face with a living legend from the 75th Ranger Regiment. The story became a powerful piece of institutional folklore, a cautionary tale about the mortal sin of assumption. Vance, once the loudest and most feared voice on the post, was irrevocably changed. The swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet, watchful humility. A week later, he sought out Captain Reed, who was now back in her proper rank and uniform, observing a land navigation course. He approached her, came to the position of attention, and delivered a formal, sincere apology, not just for his words, but for his failure in judgment. He confessed he had forgotten the most fundamental lesson of soldier, that strength comes in many forms, and the most dangerous warriors are often the ones you never see coming. Captain Reed accepted his apology with a simple, understanding nod. There was no "I told you so," no gloating, no lecture. Her quiet competence had already made its point more powerfully than any words ever could. Her vindication was not in his apology, but in the lesson he had so painfully learned. Captain Reed's impact did not end with Vance's humbling. She became a quiet mentor during her remaining time at the post. She would appear at training events, not as an evaluator, but as a guide. She spent an afternoon with a young female trainee who was on the verge of washing out of the marksmanship course, the same course Reed had dominated. The young soldier was in tears, convinced she was a failure. Reed didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, she knelt beside her in the dirt, adjusted the girl's stance, and spoke softly about the symphony of breathing, of trigger press, and of focus. She talked about finding the silence in the storm, the calm center from which all precision originates. She shared the philosophy of quiet professionalism, teaching the young soldier that confidence wasn't something you shouted, but something you built shot by shot, action by action. By the end of the day, the trainee was hitting her targets with newfound consistency. A fire had been lit in her, a belief in her own potential. A symbolic artifact was born from the legend as well. The paper target from Lane 12, the one with 40 perfectly placed holes clustered in a group the size of a fist in its center, was retrieved from the range. It was framed and mounted on the wall of the main instruction hall, right next to the pictures of decorated generals and past Medal of Honor recipients. Underneath it, a simple brass plaque was affixed. It didn't bear her name or rank. It just said, "Assume nothing." Lane 12 itself was unofficially but permanently renamed by the cadre and trainees. They called it the Captain's Lane, a quiet tribute to the day a silent warrior reminded an entire army base what true strength looked like. Months later, a new cycle of raw recruits stood on that same blistering hot rifle range. A young, newly promoted drill sergeant, one who had been a private watching from the ranks on that fateful day, stood before them. He was tough, demanding, but his eyes held a different kind of light than Vance's once had. He wasn't looking for flaws to exploit. He was searching for hidden strengths to nurture. As he gave his initial safety brief, he paused and pointed towards a framed target hanging in the instruction hall, visible through the open bay doors. "Look there," he said, his voice firm but respectful. "That is a perfect score. 40 rounds, 40 hits. It was shot right here, on this range, not long ago." The soldier who shot it was older than the rest, quieter than the rest, and our senior drill sergeant at the time decided she was a weak link before she ever fired a single round. He let the words sink in. He spent a week trying to break her. He insulted her. He humiliated her in front of everyone. He made the mistake of judging a warrior by her cover. He then walked down the line, looking each recruit in the eye. That soldier turned out to be a captain from the 75th Ranger Regiment, one of the most decorated combat veterans on this entire post. She was here to make us better, and she taught us our most important lesson without ever raising her voice. The lesson is this: your true worth is not determined by the noise you make. It is proven by the work you do. Respect is not your birthright. It is earned in silence, with sweat, and with competence. The legacy of Captain Evelyn Reed was not a score on a board or a name on a plaque. It was a fundamental shift in culture, a seed of wisdom planted in the fertile ground of a new generation of soldiers. Her quiet professionalism had created a ripple effect that would touch thousands of lives, long after she had departed Fort Jackson. The story of her time there became a foundational myth, a teaching tool more powerful than any field manual. It served as a constant reminder that the unassuming private struggling in the back of the formation might just be the one you'd want beside you in a firefight. It championed the idea that true leadership wasn't about dominance, but about quiet, demonstrated excellence. It taught the hard-won truth that arrogance is a brittle shield, easily shattered by the undeniable force of proven skill. The real measure of a person, the story whispered down through the ranks, is found in the calm before the storm, in the steady hand under pressure, in the silent dedication to the craft. It is found in the profound and powerful truth that what you are will always, eventually, speak so loudly that no one can hear what you claim to be. True legacy is not about the stories they tell about you when you're gone. It's about the standards that remain because you were there. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance and where silent precision defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.